My name is Serena Vale. I am 39 years old, and for 6 years, my younger sister Monroe stood in front of mirrors, cameras, customers, and our entire family calling herself a self-made woman. She owned a boutique called Monroe Lane, a bright little store with gold letters on the glass, soft music in the background, and expensive candles burning near the register. Online, people loved her. She posted reels about confidence, ambition, and building a dream from nothing. She smiled beside racks of silk dresses and wrote captions like, "No one handed me this life." Every time I saw that line, I felt something quiet tighten in my chest, because I knew exactly who had handed her the first key, the first check, the first vendor account, the first accountant, and the first signature that made the whole dream possible. For a long time, I said nothing. I let Monroe have the spotlight because I thought peace was worth more than credit. I thought family meant helping someone rise, even when they forgot your hand was under them. But silence has a strange cost. People begin to mistake it for weakness. Monroe did not just forget what I had done. She rewrote it. She told everyone I doubted her. She told our cousins I was bitter. She told our mother I could not stand seeing her succeed. And then, at our parents' anniversary party, with champagne glasses raised and her phone recording for Instagram, she looked straight at me and said, "Serena hates me because I became everything she couldn't." The room went still for half a second. Then people laughed the way people laugh when cruelty is dressed as confidence. Monroe smiled wider. She was wearing a cream suit I had helped pay for during her first slow winter. Our aunt pretended to cough. My mother looked at the floor. My father gave me that small warning look that meant, "Do not ruin the evening." I held my glass and asked, very softly, "Is that what you believe?" Monroe tilted her head and said, "I don't believe it. I know it. Some people dream. Some people build. Some people just stand nearby and complain." That was the moment something inside me stopped begging to be understood. If you are listening to this story right now, remember this. Sometimes the person calling you jealous is standing on the foundation you built for them. And if this kind of quiet revenge story speaks to you, subscribe, because what happened next was not loud, not messy, and not emotional. It was documented. Monroe loved telling the story of her boutique. She said she started with one rack, one vision board, and one fearless decision. The truth was less pretty. 6 years earlier, she had no credit, no savings, unpaid sales tax from a failed online shop, and 3 vendors refusing to ship to her because she had ignored invoices. She came to my apartment crying, saying she had finally found a small storefront on Bellamy Street, but the landlord needed a lease guarantee. She said it was her last chance. I had a steady consulting job then. I understood contracts. I understood tax notices. I understood how fast a dream could become debt if no one was watching the numbers. So I helped. I did not give her a motivational quote. I gave her money. I paid the first deposit. I signed as guarantor on the lease. I introduced her to an accountant named Delphine Cross, who spent 3 weekends cleaning up Monroe's tax mess so the state would release her resale permit. I opened vendor accounts under a partnership structure because the suppliers wanted someone financially stable attached to the business. I signed the original business license application because Monroe had been too careless with her previous filings to qualify a loan at that time. The agreement was simple. I would remain a silent administrative partner until the business was stable. Then Monroe would file the correct removal paperwork, refinance the vendor credit lines, and release me from the lease guarantee. She promised. She cried when she promised. She said, "You saved my life, Serena." I believed her. That was my mistake. Gratitude is beautiful when it is real. When it is fake, it becomes a temporary costume people wear until they no longer need you in the room. For the first 2 years, Monroe called me constantly. She needed help reading invoices. She needed help disputing late fees. She needed help when a shipment got stuck because she had used the wrong tax ID. She needed help when the landlord asked for insurance documentation. She needed help when her accountant flagged missing quarterly payments. I answered every time. Sometimes I was at dinner. Sometimes I was sick. Sometimes I was working late and still opened my laptop at midnight because Monroe said, "Please, Serena, I don't know what to do." I never posted about it. I never asked for applause. I just helped because she was my sister. Then the boutique became popular. A local influencer bought a dress there. A magazine mentioned Monroe Lane in a small style column. Monroe learned how to talk to cameras. She replaced panic with polish. She started saying my brand instead of the store. She stopped sending me thank you texts and started sending me requests. Then she stopped sending requests and started acting as if my involvement had been an embarrassment she had survived. At family gatherings, she became unbearable in a soft, smiling way. She corrected people when they said I had helped. Serena gave advice. She would say, "But I did the work." Advice. That was what she called my signature on her lease. Advice was what she called $48,000 in startup money. Advice was what she called the vendor contracts I negotiated when she did not know the difference between net 30 and net 60. Advice was what she called the tax cleanup that kept the state from shutting her doors before they opened. I could have corrected her then. I could have opened my email and exposed her in front of everyone, but I still had that old, tired hope that she would remember on her own. Older sisters are trained to be patient until patience becomes self-harm. We are told to be bigger, kinder, softer. We are told family is complicated. But sometimes family is not complicated. Sometimes someone is using your silence as free protection. The anniversary party was held at a private dining room in Savannah, with white flowers on every table and framed photos of my parents from 45 years of marriage. Monroe arrived late so everyone would look at her. She brought her assistant, a nervous young woman named Bria, whose job seemed to be filming every entrance Monroe made. Monroe hugged my mother with one arm and kept her face turned toward the phone. She hugged me last, air kissing near my cheek, then whispered, "Please don't be weird tonight." I remember almost laughing. Imagine stealing the truth from someone and still asking them not to make you uncomfortable. During dinner, Monroe announced her biggest news. Monroe Lane was expanding into a second location, a luxury flagship on Whitcomb Avenue. There would be a grand launch in 3 weeks, with influencers, local press, vendors, and a ribbon cutting. Everyone clapped. My father looked proud. My mother cried. Monroe lifted her glass and said, "This is proof that when you believe in yourself, nobody can stop you." Then she looked at me and added, "Even when some people secretly want you to fail." That should have been enough. But Monroe was addicted to performance. She kept going. She told the room that I had always been safe, always been small, always hiding behind practical jobs while she took risks. Then came the line that cut the last thread. She hates me because I became everything she couldn't. My nephew laughed. My cousin looked away. My father said nothing. And I understood finally that my family did not need more evidence of my loyalty. They needed a consequence for ignoring it. I went home that night and opened a storage box I had not touched in years. Inside were folders labeled Monroe Lane, lease, vendor accounts, tax cleanup, license, partnership notes. I had kept everything because I am the kind of woman people call boring until they need proof. Every email was there, every receipt, every wire transfer, every accountant note from Delphine, every vendor contract with my name listed as administrative partner. And there, inside the original business license paperwork, was the clause Monroe had ignored for 6 years. It was not dramatic language, legal truth rarely is. It simply stated that any listed partner holding administrative liability could withdraw from the business license, vendor guarantee, and lease-related financial responsibility with written notice if the managing partner failed to complete release documentation after the stabilization period. The stabilization period had ended 4 years earlier. Monroe had never filed the release. She had never refinanced the vendor accounts. She had never removed my name from the lease guarantee. She had built her empire while leaving my neck under the blade. I stared at that clause for a long time. Then I called Delphine Cross. She was retired now, but still sharp enough to hear one sentence and understand everything. I said, "Monroe never removed me." Delphine sighed and said, "I wondered when you would notice." That sentence hurt more than I expected. Not because Delphine blamed me, but because she had seen the truth years ago. I asked what would happen if I withdrew properly. She said, "Vendors will review the accounts. The landlord will review the lease. The state will update the license. If Monroe has been representing herself as sole founder while using your guarantee, she will have a very uncomfortable month." A very uncomfortable month. That sounded gentle. What Monroe had given me was years of humiliation wrapped in family silence. Still, I did not want her store. I did not want her money. I did not want to destroy employees who had done nothing wrong. I wanted my name back. I wanted my liability removed. I wanted every person who had laughed at me to watch Monroe explain why my signature was holding up the life she said I could never build. So I waited. That was the hardest part. Revenge done correctly requires timing. Monroe's flagship launch was scheduled for a Thursday evening. Vendors were shipping final inventory that week. The landlord was preparing a press-friendly lease amendment for her expansion. The city business registry was updating her license category because she wanted to add in-house styling events and private shopping nights. Monroe had built the perfect stage. I simply decided to let the truth walk onto it. 3 days before the launch, I filed the partnership withdrawal packet with the state and sent formal notice to the landlord, the vendors, and the accountant Monroe currently used. I attached the original agreement, the expired stabilization clause, and the documentation showing my startup funding, lease guarantee, vendor support, and repeated requests for release. My letter was short. I did not insult Monroe. I did not accuse her of theft. I wrote one sentence that mattered. Effective immediately, I withdraw all administrative partnership support and request removal of my name, credit, guarantee, and liability from Monroe Lane and all related expansions. By noon, the first vendor froze her shipment. By 2, the landlord requested a lease review before allowing the flagship opening event. By 4, Monroe's new accountant emailed her a list of documents she had never bothered to understand. By 6, my phone started ringing. I did not answer. Then came the messages. "What did you do?" "Serena, call me now." "You are ruining everything." "You jealous witch." Then, finally, one that showed she understood the problem. "Why is your name on my license?" I looked at that message and almost smiled. Not because I was happy, because after 6 years of calling herself self-made, Monroe had finally read her own paperwork. If you are still here, subscribe to the channel because stories like this are not about shouting. They are about the quiet moment when proof becomes louder than pride. The launch night arrived with Monroe in full panic hidden under makeup. I did not plan to attend, but Delphine told me the landlord had requested that all listed parties be present for the emergency review before the event. So I went. I wore a navy dress, low heels, and the pearl earrings my grandmother left me. Nothing flashy, nothing angry. I arrived at the new flagship 30 minutes before the ribbon cutting. Outside, the windows were covered in cream curtains. Inside, staff rushed between half-empty racks because 2 major vendors had paused delivery. A flower wall stood near the entrance with Monroe Lane written in gold script. It looked beautiful from far away. Up close, it smelled like fear. Monroe saw me and crossed the room so fast her assistant almost dropped the camera. "How dare you come here?" she hissed. I said, "The landlord asked me to be present." She looked around, terrified someone might hear. "You are doing this because you cannot stand my success." I looked at the empty spaces on the racks. "No, Monroe, I am doing this because your success still has my signature under it." Her face changed then. Not guilt, not apology, calculation. The landlord, Mr. Harlan Pike, arrived with his attorney. Two vendor representatives joined on video. Monroe's accountant sat at a small styling table with a laptop open and sweat shining along his forehead. It was supposed to be a glamorous launch meeting. Instead, it looked like a financial hearing inside a perfume bottle. Mr. Pike began calmly. "Ms. Vale, you are requesting release from all guarantees and administrative partnership obligations connected to Monroe Lane." I said, "Correct." Monroe laughed too loudly. "This is ridiculous. Serena was never part of my company. She helped a little at the beginning because she had nothing else going on." I opened my folder and slid the first document across the table. Original business license. Both names. My signature. Her signature. Partnership clause. Highlighted. Monroe stopped laughing. Then I placed the lease guarantee beside it. Then the startup transfer receipts. Then the vendor contracts. Then Delphine's tax cleanup notes showing the boutique could not legally open until the old liabilities were cleared. Each document landed softly, but Monroe flinched as if I were dropping stones. Mr. Pike read in silence. The attorney leaned closer. The accountant removed his glasses. Monroe whispered, "This is private." I said, "So is helping you. But you made the lie public." That broke something in her. She stood up and pointed at me. "You think paperwork makes you important? I am the face of this brand. I built the following. I built the customers. Nobody comes here for you." I nodded. "You are right. Nobody comes here for me. That is why I am not asking for the boutique. I am asking to be removed from the risk you left in my name while you called me jealous in public." The room went quiet. Outside the glass doors, guests had started arriving. I could see our parents near the entrance dressed for celebration. Cousins stood behind them. A local blogger adjusted her ring light. Monroe had invited everyone who had heard her insult me. Again, she had built the perfect stage. Mr. Pike cleared his throat and said the opening could not proceed under the announced terms until Monroe provided replacement guarantees, corrected license filings, and updated vendor credit documentation. One vendor representative said their company would not ship the remaining inventory until the account was restructured without my credit support. Another said Monroe Lane's payment history needed review because several invoices had been extended under the original partner-backed agreement. Monroe's face went pale under her foundation. Then the blogger outside knocked on the glass and mouthed, "Are we starting?" Monroe looked trapped. She had two choices: admit there was a review, or pretend everything was fine and risk the landlord shutting it down in front of everyone. Mr. Pike made the choice easier. He said, "Ms. Monroe, you may hold a limited reception, but you cannot represent the expansion as fully operational tonight." For the first time in my life, I saw Monroe with no script. She walked outside with a smile that shook at the corners. I followed only because Mr. Pike asked me to sign the acknowledgement of review near the front table. Monroe stood before the guests, the ribbon behind her, cameras pointed at her face. She began with her usual voice. "Thank you all for coming to this beautiful new chapter." Then she stopped. Her eyes found mine. I did not glare. I did not smile. I simply stood there holding the folder she should have respected years ago. She swallowed. "There has been a small administrative delay," she said. Someone asked, With the store? Monroe's lips parted. She looked at our mother, then at the vendors waiting on video inside, then back at the cameras. Her whole brand was built on being self-made. The truth was standing 10 feet away in navy blue. It turns out, Monroe said slowly, that my original business structure included Serena in ways I failed to properly update. A murmur moved through the room. My father's face tightened. My mother covered her mouth. Monroe forced herself to continue. When Monroe Lane started, Serena provided financial and administrative support. More than I publicly acknowledged, the expansion is being delayed while I correct those documents. It was not a full apology. Monroe was not that generous. But it was public. It was recorded. It was enough to crack the statue she had built of herself. My cousin, the same one who had laughed at the party, looked at me and then looked away. My father walked over, his voice low. "Serena, why didn't you tell us?" I almost laughed. I did not know I needed to defend the truth from my own family. He had no answer. Parents often want peace after they have allowed disrespect to become tradition. But peace without accountability is just silence with better lighting. Monroe came toward me after the guests began whispering in small groups. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was still sharp. "Are you satisfied?" I said. "No. Satisfaction would have been you telling the truth before I had to bring documents." She said, "You humiliated me." I said, "You humiliated me first. The difference is, I used evidence." That was when Bria, her assistant, quietly lowered the phone. She looked young and exhausted. I wondered how many times Monroe had taken credit for her work too. Pride like Monroe's does not steal from one person. It practices everywhere. Over the next month, Monroe learned what business looked like without my shadow holding the walls. Vendors demanded personal guarantees. The landlord required a new lease structure. The state requested corrected filings. Her accountant resigned after discovering years of sloppy records. She had to cancel 2 influencer events and sell part of her personal jewelry to cover delayed inventory payments. Online, she posted less. When she did post, the captions changed. No more, "I built this alone." No more, "Self-made from nothing." Just product photos and careful words. My family tried to soften the story. My mother called and said, "She is still your sister." I said, "And I am still the person she lied about." My father said Monroe was under pressure. I said, "So was I when my name was attached to her debts." They wanted me to forgive quickly because my anger made them uncomfortable. But I was not angry anymore. That was what frightened them. Anger can be argued with. Peace backed by paperwork cannot. 2 weeks after the failed launch, Monroe came to my office. No camera, no assistant, no cream suit. She looked smaller, not because she had lost money, but because she had lost the story she told herself. She placed a folder on my desk. Inside were the corrected filings removing my name from the business license, the vendor accounts, and the lease guarantee. "You got what you wanted," she said. I looked through every page before answering. "No, Monroe, I got what you promised me 6 years ago." She sat across from me and stared at the floor. For a moment, I saw the sister who had cried in my apartment, terrified her dream was over before it began. But then I remembered the woman at the party, smiling while she turned my sacrifice into jealousy. Both versions were real. That is the hardest truth about people who hurt us. They are not always monsters. Sometimes they are people we loved, who chose their image over our dignity. Monroe whispered. I was embarrassed. I said, "By what?" She wiped her cheek angrily. "That I needed you. That everyone thought you were the responsible one and I was the mess. When the store became successful, I wanted one thing that was mine." My voice stayed calm. "Then you should have built one thing honestly." She looked at me then, and for once, she did not have a comeback. I did not take the boutique. I did not ask for shares. I did not demand repayment beyond the documented liability release. People expected me to burn Monroe Lane to the ground, but that was never my goal. Fire is dramatic, but freedom is cleaner. I wanted my name off her risk, my signature out of her lie, and my piece returned to me without her fingerprints on it. The flagship opened 3 months later, smaller than planned. No ribbon cutting, no blogger wall, no speech about becoming everything I could not. Monroe stood behind the counter herself because she could no longer afford extra staff. She learned invoices. She learned lease terms. She learned taxes. She learned that being the face of a business is not the same as carrying its weight. As for me, I stopped attending family events where respect was optional. I built a consulting practice helping small business owners understand the paperwork they were too excited to read. My first workshop was called Before You Sign. I did not name Monroe. I did not need to. Every lesson had her shadow in it. Sometimes people ask if I miss my sister. The honest answer is yes, but not the sister who mocked me. I miss the one who once trusted me enough to ask for help. But missing someone does not mean handing them another weapon. Love without boundaries becomes a workplace for selfish people. The last message Monroe sent me was simple. I did not know how much you were holding. I replied, that was the problem. You never looked down. You only looked at the camera. And that is the truth I carry now. I was not jealous of Monroe's success. I was tired of being buried beneath it. She called me small because I did not stand in the spotlight. But when the lights finally hit the paperwork, everyone saw whose signature had been holding the stage together.